It's always important to know the past, because otherwise it's like a ship without an anchor. If we don't understand the context, then we don't understand why we are where we are. And there's a danger that if we don't understand where we come from, that we abandon things that are actually important.
As we know the history of Adventist education, the events, the ideas that shaped it, we have more of an identity of who are we and what's important in what we're doing. If we walk into a situation cold and try to teach in it or learn in it, we're like orphans. We don't understand the ideas and the history and the DNA, so to speak, that is affecting what we do here.
When we see how God has worked in the past, in many ways, and education is an important one, when we see what He has done, how He has helped us through struggles, each of those struggles, each of those challenges, each of those learning times becomes a lesson for us.
Understanding your past doesn't mean that you don't change things. There are often many good reasons for changing things. Not always radical change, sometimes gradual, evolutionary, careful change, sometimes radical change. But if you're not clear on who you are and how you got to the place you are, then you don't know which things you can abandon, which things need gradual change, and which things need radical change.
This is how we go forward, I would say, by looking back, because it gives you a sense of identity.
We must know our history. A people without a history really are not a people. There is no community without history. If we don't know who we are, where we've come from, we really don't know where we're going.
Después de la gran decepción de 1844, no eran muchos los que se preocupaban por la educación. Después de todo, si Jesús vendría pronto, ¿para qué perder tiempo en las escuelas en vez de predicar? Pero este concepto pronto fue cambiando y la educación comenzó a ser reconocida como una necesidad que debía ser suplida, no solo para garantizar el crecimiento de la Iglesia, sino además para lograr el principal objetivo de la educación, el cual Elena de White definiría como obtener el conocimiento de cómo podemos glorificar a Dios, a quien pertenecemos por creación y redención.
It came slowly. Many Adventists believed the Lord was coming so soon that there simply wasn't time to establish schools. But by the early 1870s, Ellen White sort of gave a push to this with her testimony in 1872 that we really needed a Christian basis, and we have a blueprint that includes the Bible, and we should separate from the public schools and form our own schools. So that was the inspiration. 1872, her testimony. 1873, James White and others get behind this and begin thinking, okay, where can we have it? Since Battle Creek had been our church headquarters since 1852, 1855, we began to think very seriously about having our first college right there in Battle Creek.
The discussion among the church leaders was going on about formal education, about starting a college. there in Battle Creek. And so Ellen White, James White, Uriah Smith, a number of the other people, the president of the General Conference, George Butler, all of them were involved in this discussion. And eventually they established the Seventh-day Adventist Educational Society, and they decided to make a start with Battle Creek College.
Los hermanos de la iglesia dicen, vamos a hacer un colegio. Vamos a hacer un colegio para preparar a los obreros, a los misioneros, pero vamos a hacer algo bien. Y entonces hacen dos cosas, es muy interesante. En primer lugar, tienen que juntar dinero. Es decir, construir una escuela necesita dinero. Y para eso le piden a los hermanos de iglesia que donen, para construir un colegio que sea algo nuevo, algo representativo, con la mejor calidad y que pueda preparar a las nuevas generaciones de obreros de la iglesia. Y los hermanos donan, son muy generosos. Y lo segundo que ella hace, una cosa es dinero y en segundo lugar lo que se necesita es un plan de estudios, es decir, ¿qué se va a enseñar? Va a tener reconocimiento del Estado, va a ser una escuelita que es puertas adentro y que nosotros preparamos obreros. De hecho, en esa época ya había muchas de lo que se llamaba en inglés Bible Schools, escuelas bíblicas, que las iglesias las tenían para preparar a sus pastores con programas de lo que llamaríamos hoy educación continua, no un programa formal. Pero la iglesia decide no, vamos a hacer una institución reconocida por el gobierno con credenciales, y así es como comienza el Battle Creek College, que se establece en 1874 en la ciudad de Battle Creek con la acreditación del estado de Michigan para funcionar como un colegio, no como una escuela primaria o secundaria, no tenía nada de eso. Es decir, era preparación profesional.
They built the first college close to our printing press there. They found teachers in Goodloe Harper Bell, Sidney Brownsberger, Uriah Smith, and others. They did not establish a dormitory situation. They felt it would be better for the students to be in the homes and have a family background. That didn't always work too well, and so a dormitory was established later. They had a close alliance with members of the press at the Review and Herald, like Uriah Smith, and with Battle Creek Sanitarium. John Harvey Kellogg would come over and lecture for some chemistry, physics, and pre-med classes. So this was sort of the beginning, 1872, 73, 74. Later on, in the later 19th century, they would establish other colleges, such as Atlantic Union College, Healdsburg College, which became Pacific Union College, and so on. But right here in Battle Creek, Michigan was the first.
Retoño de un sueño que comenzó a florecer en el corazón de la Iglesia Adventista, el Battle Creek College creció como el primer intento de llevar a la práctica una educación diferente, sin raíces en la tradición o el conocimiento del presente, sino fundamentada en la sabiduría eterna que proviene de la palabra de Dios.
They had three main goals, the people who created the SDA Educational Society and started Battle Creek College. They wanted to create an environment that would protect the young people from worldly influences. They saw that the other colleges were very secular, very worldly. There was a lot of partying going on at the other colleges, and they wanted to protect the young people from that influence. And so they made very careful rules for behavior at the college. So that was one of their goals. A second goal was to prepare young people who could become workers for the Adventist Church and who would go out and preach the gospel. And that was partly a whole process of refinement. There were a lot of young people who were new members in the church, but they didn't have much education. And they felt like they needed to learn to speak publicly, they needed to write, all of those sorts of things. And the third goal was, of course, to teach the Adventist theology, biblical truth as they perceived it, and to promote Adventist philosophy and teachings. So those were their three ideas to begin with. But when they established the school, originally they established it to be much like the other schools that were, the colleges that were in North America at the time.
The biggest challenge was to understand what an Adventist school should be. I mean, after all, we didn't have people who were educated in these things. Where are we going to get somebody to head up this new institution? Well, they had a man by the name of Sidney Brownsberger. Sidney Brownsberger had a master's degree from the University of Michigan, and he was an experienced educator. There was only one problem. He didn't understand what was involved in Adventist education. And so he created what's called a liberal arts school, and at the center of the curriculum was the classics. Now, what do we mean by the classics? We mean the ancient writings of Greece and Rome. I'm not talking about the Christian writings. I'm talking about the Greek philosophers and the great Roman orators who wrote their stuff in books. And so for 6 or 7 years, the people studied pagan classics, what they called the heathen classics, in the original languages. This was traditional Western education, had been for over 1,000 years. And so what we did is we duplicated what was found in the public universities. And here we have a problem, because they never had a Bible course. No Bible course was required. They're going to train ministers, and they're going to have a Bible course? No religious implications to the curriculum. And beyond that, the bulletin said, because they were trying to get students, you can come to this school and you won't even know it's a Seventh-day Adventist school. Now that's a paraphrase, but that's basically what it said. There'll be nothing sectarian about this school. And so that you can see there's a real problem in understanding. But that problem needs to be seen against the background of what the church administrators were saying when they said we want a school. They said, we want a school where they'll learn Bible. And not only Bible, but the Adventist understanding of the Bible, so that we can send people out and teach the Bible and teach Adventism and do evangelism. And we want people who can know practical things. And of course, Ellen White, 1872, wrote Proper Education. And in that, she talked about vocational education. She talked about training for the world of work, get physical exercise so that their bodies are strong. And when the school started, like I said, it was just the opposite of what the founders had expected.
In the 1870s and 1880s, it simply didn't appear as though many of our church leaders understood what she was trying to say. They were very intelligent people. They meant well. I don't mean to blame them for their mistakes. But men like Sidney Brownsberger had a master's degree in the classics, Greek and Latin and literature and so on. They did not quite understand how to put in practice what she was saying when she said, we need practical labor for our students, we need loving discipline. They were too used to beating students, and caning them in the 19th century. We need religion integrated into all parts of our curriculum. Previously, what Uriah Smith had done was to offer a Bible class or two, and that was optional, so that students could come or not come. There was little understanding as to how to integrate the Adventist message into every class, science classes and math classes and history classes. They just at that point didn't understand how to do it.
There was not the there was not the willingness to try and break free of the bounds of what contemporary society said was a good education. And I think we should give credit to our pioneers. They didn't want to just have an educational institution. Too often today, I feel, we create colleges and then don't resource them appropriately, and schools, and we shouldn't, it's not enough just to have an Adventist school or an Adventist university. I think they should be the best. This is what Ellen White talks about. She talks about making men who are not mere reflectors of other men's opinion. Our schools and institutions should be the best. And so our pioneers, to give them credit, were trying to have something that would give education of the highest level. But having agreed on that, they couldn't then break the shackles of contemporary thought about what a good education was, and so they just end up being very focused on this classical curriculum, which is neither terribly practical nor terribly Christian, and certainly not very Seventh-day Adventist.
No hizo falta mucho tiempo para que los pioneros descubrieran que llevar adelante el objetivo de una educación adventista requería mucho más que paredes, bancos o alumnos. Primero, deberían estar dispuestos a aceptar nuevas respuestas para antiguas preguntas, abrir sus mentes para entender la voluntad divina y sus corazones para vencer sus miedos y atreverse a ser diferentes, mantenerse fieles y confiados en que aquel que les encomendó esta misión ahora estaría con ellos en cada paso del camino hacia alcanzarla.
In 1872, Ellen White wrote on the importance of education, and she would continue through the rest of her life to write on education. And she was pressing, God was pressing really through the prophetic gift, that we not just do the same thing as classical education, but that we make this a Bible-centered education that was also very practical. And so this was in their minds, and the councils continued, but to integrate this was very challenging.
What God was showing her was so radically different than what they were used to that it really took them a while to kind of catch on.
¿Cómo empezar de cero un tipo de educación con características específicas diferentes de lo que era común en la educación clásica del siglo XIX? ¿Dónde estaban esas personas que podían cambiar su mentalidad? Es decir, yo fui formado en la educación clásica, pero para la educación adventista yo necesito otros patrones, otra manera de pensar.
One of the problems in those early years is not everyone had a clear picture of what the blueprint should be. One of the problems is that we were drawing upon Seventh-day Adventists who themselves had educational backgrounds in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, the classics, secular literature, and Sidney Brownsberger frankly admitted himself, I really don't know how to run a school such as Mrs. White has presented to us. And so there was some fumbling, there was, some searching, how are we going to do it?
En momentos de indecisión es común recurrir a lo conocido. Aquello que es familiar proporciona seguridad y sostiene en la estabilidad de la rutina. Pero cuando el desafío es un cambio de paradigma y la meta la consecución de parámetros divinos, superarse excede a la subsistencia y converge en un único pero poderoso aspecto: fe.
A new president came to campus. He was a man who was a Seventh-day Baptist, not a Seventh-day Adventist, but they were looking for somebody who was qualified because the first president had to quit because of health issues.
They thought, we need to have someone with a doctoral degree. Well, there weren't any Adventist educators with doctoral degrees in the whole church. But there was one man who had just shortly before had accepted the Adventist message. He had not yet even been baptized. His name was Alexander McClure. He had been a Baptist. And he was willing to come. He had a Doctor of Divinity degree. And so maybe more for his degree than for other reasons, he was asked to come and be president of the college. But he was not so familiar with Adventist ways and Adventist thought. Yes, it accepted the message, but it was new and all of these things.
He was not yet a Seventh-day Adventist, but he had a degree. Some things are always important. He had a degree. He had his master's degree, which was something back in those days. But as I say, he's not a Seventh-day Adventist, and he had an interesting philosophy for operating the school, and that is you don't need a lot of rules. Students don't need a lot of rules. And even the rules that you do have, he didn't seem to think needed to be enforced very rigorously. Now, accompanying him, or an ally of his, was the Bible teacher, who, as I recollect, had been the school board chair. And what was his name? Well, very famous in Adventist history, Uriah Smith. Now, Elder Smith was a great editor. He did a lot of good things, but he also did not necessarily think you needed a lot of rules for students. And the rules you did have, you didn't need to really enforce. So on the other side, you had a man that we've already mentioned, Goodloe Harper Bell, with his long beard. Goodloe Harper Bell, he thought you should have lots of rules and you should enforce them vigorously. And who was on his side? Well, the new school board chairman, G.I. Butler, the president of the General Conference. So you have a conflict, potential conflict set up where you have Bell and Butler, got to have strong rules, enforce them. And you have Alexander McLaren, and you have Uriah Smith. Oh, let's be more gentle.
It was very sad. It was a very ugly scene, and a lot of people were hurt by it. Bell particularly, I think, was hurt by the conflict. And everything disintegrated. The faculty were fighting amongst themselves, and the students were, it would be too strong to say that they were rioting, because they didn't riot, but they held protest meetings, and it was a big mess, actually. And so the board decided that the best way to bring everything down emotionally was to just close the school.
In less than 10 years after Battle Creek started, it was in trouble. In 1881, it closed. It closed because there was conflict and there was disagreement about how Battle Creek College should be run. There were those who said that we need to emulate the curriculum and the standards, and if we are too strict, the students will go. Ellen White had some very interesting things to say. She said, if we're going to copy the world, if parents want to send their children, let them go, and let those who want to make education after God's plan take their resources and start another school. She urged them not to lower their standards, not to try to please. She said that if we just look at what's popular, then surely Satan is the one who's winning because he has more followers. We have a very different plan.
Nuestra primera universidad adventista se cerró por completo, por todo un año, para que pudiesen retomar el proyecto de cómo debería ser la educación adventista y realmente comenzar con un fundamento sólido. Y ya con personal que quizás no tenían todos los títulos, pero sí tenían el compromiso y estaban en el proyecto de un mejoramiento continuo propio. La Biblia ya entró como materia requerida en el currículo cada año, ya no era simplemente algo secundario, y se comenzó un programa de trabajo manual para los alumnos, y los alumnos viviendo en el plantel para así recibir una educación más completa. Y de ahí comenzó ya a tomar fuerza la educación adventista.
El cierre del Battle Creek College no fue un momento fácil para los adventistas del séptimo día. Muchos incluso se preguntaron por qué Dios había permitido que esta primera institución educativa adventista, en la cual se había invertido tanto esfuerzo, tiempo y dinero, ahora llegara a este punto. Pero la verdad es que había muchos principios básicos de la educación adventista que necesitaban ser revisados, principios que aún hoy tienen mucho para enseñarnos.
The history of Adventist education is important for that reason. We need to understand it so we can say, how can we develop into the future? What are the areas where Adventist education perhaps is not as strong as it might be? What are the areas actually where it's very strong and we should continue doing those things? But equally, there are lessons to be learned. There are the lessons that when education is purely secular, even though you have a generally moral, and if I can put it this way, in a safe environment, which is really important, but still, it's not as important an influence on young people as it ought to be, because all the educational influences, everything they hear in the classroom, is secular. And that was a problem with early Adventist education. So we need to learn that lesson. We need to know it's not just enough to have specifically Adventist influences in the classroom. We need to have them in the dormitories and in the whole institution as well. And it's not enough just to have them in one of those places. We need them in all of those places to shape lives of service to the church and to God. Adventist education didn't always live up to that, and it was at its least effective when that was the case. It's least effective, that is, not necessarily in intellectual output, if I can put it that way, but in shaping people to give lives of service to God. And part of the importance of Christian education is it has to be intellectually challenging, it has to produce minds that can think, that can question, and that can come up with answers. But it also is about lives of service, service to others, service to God.
La verdadera educación adventista es la que trasciende los objetivos de la educación secular. Es aquella que posee mayor amplitud y un fin más elevado, pues prepara a los estudiantes para que sean ciudadanos productivos a la sociedad en esta vida, como también ciudadanos capaces de brindar un servicio más amplio por toda la eternidad.